I'd like to thank Secretary Carey and Assistant Administrator Sobek for the opportunity to make this presentation. I have to figure out the slides. Let's see if this works. Okay. There's been a divergence of the perspectives on the status of fisheries, but in 2007, Boris Worm and I put together a group of scientists to assemble data and see if we could come to agreement. We were able to come to agreement, and this talk summarizes what we've learned, and we would say is now a general consensus that was reached among the vast majority of the scientific community. This consensus was possible because of observations on the status of fish stocks, that is, data that have been collected. And our key conclusion has been that the status of fish stocks and trends is very different in different places. So in this presentation, I'll update you on the status and trends in fisheries and talk a bit about the management priorities and solutions. But first, a little bit of background is required on the subject of overfishing. And essentially, overfishing is caused by too much fishing pressure. That is continuously taking too high a portion of the population or the community of fish. The major symptom of overfishing is low population size. So to produce long-term maximum sustainable yield, there is a level of fishing pressure that we want to see and a resulting stock size that we expect. And to produce food from the oceans, and I believe that's the first time food has been mentioned so far today, we want to be in that range. Now in the US, we have a classification system where we distinguish between overfishing, which is too much fishing pressure, there on the y-axis, and overfished, which means there's too few fish, which is a measure of stock size. Now, and I will present data both on the abundance of fish and their fishing pressure relative to those levels that produce maximum sustained yield. The food, we've gone one, there we go, okay. The Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations produces a report every few years on the status of fish stocks and breaks stocks into three categories: underexploited, here shown in blue, fully exploited, shown in green, and overexploited, shown in red. The percentage underexploited has continuously declined since about 1970, while the percentage overfished was increasing up to 2008 and may have stabilized since then at roughly 30%. While many view the decline of underexploited stocks as a concern, this is in fact a necessary step to produce food from the oceans. Now this has occurred during a period when fishing effort, shown in red, has been rising, but catches globally have stabilized. This means that the same number of fish are being caught despite increasing energy and fishing effort. Now we can split the stocks of the world into two groups, actually four groups, based on their size and whether or not they are formally assessed and actually managed. In general, assessed stocks tend to be better managed and on average appear to be at about the level that produces long-term maximum sustainable yield, and on average appear to be stable. Unassessed stocks, however, are often unmanaged and therefore more depleted, and many such stocks appear to be in decline. And these unassessed and unmanaged stocks account for roughly 2/3 of the global catch. And our understanding of these stocks is much poorer than our understanding of the status of the assessed stocks. Interestingly enough, there is a strong, there is a strong relationship between the status of fish stocks and their size. The large fish stocks appear on average to be in good shape. That is, all the fish stocks whose average catch is on the order of 10,000 tons or higher, which is about 90% of the world's fish stocks, appear to on average be at the level that produces maximum sustained yield, while the smaller stocks appear to be in poor shape. We believe this is because large fish stocks receive more management attention. Small fish stocks are typically unmanaged, and they're also inherently more vulnerable because they tend to have smaller range and lower abundance. The status depends on the taxonomy and the location of the fisheries, and of particular note is that some taxonomic groups, particularly sharks, skates, and rays, appear to be in particularly bad shape and of extreme concern. Our best knowledge is from scientific assessments which are performed on about 500 fish stocks around the world, constituting about 35% of global catch. Such assessed stocks are heavily biased towards developed countries, with Africa and South Asia having very few stocks that are assessed. In this graph, the size of the circle represents the total catch reported to FAO, and the proportion in green is how much of the stocks are in assessments that we have access to. And what we'll see is that we know much, much less about stocks in South Asia and Africa. Now I'm going to move into some complicated figures that show the regional trends in exploitation rates in different regions of the world. In general, most developed countries have been reducing fishing pressure, which you can see as a decline in those lines, over the last decade. This emphasizes that we actually do know how to manage fish stocks if we apply the tools in our toolkit. And some areas, as you will look, you can see Alaska and New Zealand have never really been subject to any significant overfishing pressure, while other areas shaded in red have seen significant overfishing. And if we look in detail, here's the U.S. West Coast. That horizontal line is the level of fishing pressure that would produce long-term maximum sustainable yield, and you see that it never actually exceeded that level, and in the west coast of the U.S. we're now hardly fishing our stocks at all. In fact, we harvest for the bottom fish about 1% a year. In contrast, the European Union has typically been fishing well above the level that would produce maximum sustained yield, but has made significant progress in the last decade in reducing fishing pressure down towards that horizontal line. We can do a similar graph where we look at the biomass of stocks, and again, there are major differences in fish biomass in different regions. So if we look in detail at the U.S. East Coast, now you want to be at or above the horizontal line, because we're now talking biomass, and you see the U.S. East Coast, while subject to overfishing and many stocks overfished, has been rebuilding biomass so that on average they're almost now back to the level that produces maximum sustained yield. In contrast, the Atlantic Ocean tuna fisheries were largely in very, very large abundance back around 1970 and have been declining, and in the recent years have typically gone below the level that produces maximum sustained yield. Now let me just briefly talk about management priorities. Slide. Biodiversity loss is of particular concern in tropical regions that house most marine species. These regions often have low management effectiveness and rapidly increasing catch, in some places fueled by foreign fleets. This makes them an urgent conservation concern in these hotspots. Bycatch is the unintentional catch. Whoops, let's catch up with the bycatch. These are all, sorry. One more. Bycatch is the unintentional catch of non-target species and is difficult to estimate at a global scale because it often goes unreported. When bycatch is actively managed, it can be reduced dramatically. However, in most of the world, there is little bycatch measurement or management. And finally, in conclusion, fisheries are at a global crossroads. While management has been effective in some areas, overfishing remains a primary concern in most jurisdictions. Rebuilding is a global priority, and hotspots in the global south need urgent attention, and bycatch is a major problem that needs to be addressed comprehensively.